Well, folks, welcome back to the Frontier Western Heritage Channel. I'm Todd Kessner, and I'm back out here at the gun range outside of Bozeman, Montana, with really part 3 of the 1860 Army revolver test. And if you've been watching the 1860 Army videos, you would have seen me go from a triple F powder to a double F powder just to see how that would work, and go from a 4.54 ball to a 4.57. And the last trial, actually, with the double F powder, 35 grains of Old Ainsford powder, really seemed to work very well with the 4.57 ball. So the groups are starting to tighten up, and so now I'm going to go back a little bit and start talking about the 1860 Army more in the period that it was used as a primary firearm for folks that were carrying it really during the Civil War era more than anything, as far as it using it as a defense weapon, definitely, and what's authentic and what isn't authentic. So I'm going to load up 6 chambers with my 35 grains of Old Ainsford. I'm sorry, Old Ainsford. I'm still going to go back and forth on that, even though I've been corrected. Old Ainsford black powder, 35 grains double F with a round ball, 4.57 ball over a felt wad. And then I'm going to compare that to the Johnston and Dow Conical over 2F Old Ainsford as well, and see which one performs better. And some folks have said, you know, putting the felt lubed wad under the ball is not the way it was done back in the day. And in reality, if you go back, and you can find them on the internet still, copies of Sam Colt's directions on how to load any of his cap and ball revolvers, most of the directions will tell you put in the powder, put in the ball, cap it up, and shoot it. There was no expectation that you were going to reload and fire another 6 shots. The expectation was you're going to have 6 shots, and that's what you're going to have, which is a whole lot better than having 1 shot. So to remedy that, a lot of folks carried multiple revolvers, and so they even had them in saddle scabbards, pommel holsters, 2 to 4 revolvers. If you were a Missouri and Kansas border ruffian, you may very well carry 4 revolvers and go into battle like that and not necessarily reload. However, the felt wad has been documented as a legitimate way to load it. In those Colt instructions toward the end of the cap and ball era, they actually said in there that you could put what they called a felt washer wad under the ball. And not having any experience with what those looked like, I'm imagining felt wad with a hole in the center, like a washer, is the only thing I can think of, but they did talk about a felt wad toward the end. Another source for information on loading with the wad comes from Elmer Keith, who wrote 6 Guns by Keith and also Hell I Was There by Elmer Keith. And both those books are really good books about black powder firearms and modern firearms as well. Definitely he moved particularly revolvers, into a whole different velocity era than they had previously been. But he was also fortunate enough to be at the age and be born in a time that, as a young person, he actually had conversations around Helena, Montana with Civil War veterans. And when you think about, knowing of Elmer Keith and knowing that, I don't remember what year he died, but he was alive during my lifetime, and that man reaching back just far enough to be able to talk to Civil War veterans, it's amazing that from me to Elmer Keith to the Civil War veterans, 3 guys in line takes us back to the Civil War. And so when we think about things that are 150, 160 years ago, and look at it as if it's knights in shining armor, is that long ago, and in reality, now we can get back to the Civil War with 3 men knowing each other, or at least being born overlapping times. And matter of fact, my grandfather was born in 1892. Here it is, 2021. I knew my grandfather well. He was 37 years old when Wyatt Earp died. So it doesn't take too many generations to get back to the 1800s, 1860s and Civil War. But Elmer Keith was talking to those Civil War veterans. They talked about taking an old felt hat, much like the Stetson. They would have wore probably a wool felt hat, the Army issue. And if they found one, they would cut out the wads, felt wads out of that felt hat, soak them in lube, and then use those wadding underneath the round ball. So there's a source from a guy that spoke to veterans of the Civil War that said, yeah, we used a felt wad in the 1860s underneath a round ball. To me, that shows that we've got an authentic way of loading with a felt wad, and so it's not the modern loading method that we expect today, or that we would suspect today. It is actually a very authentic way to load. The other way, of course, is to just load the conical bullet right over the powder, and so we're going to test that as well. And in that same historical documentation that Elmer Keith noted as he was talking to Civil War veterans around Helena, Montana, he asked them about conicals versus round ball. So we're going to look at that a little bit today. But according to veterans, what they talked about is if you wanted some extra distance and wanted penetration, you were going to go with the conical. If you wanted to just smack somebody and cause quite a bit of just shock, you went with the round ball. Interesting history. Again, Six Guns by Keith is a great book to read on this, and Hell I Was There by Elmer Keith as well. Very good book to read. So I'm going to load up 35 grains of old Ainsford, number 2F, and I'm going to put in a felt wad and round ball, and let's see what that does. So I haven't gone through the loading procedure, particularly in the second video. You've seen it a couple different times. Just because I've got a new procedure here, going to drop a felt wad underneath. Let's take a look at that for the first couple chambers, and then we'll shoot those. All right, I've got my powder measure set at 35 grains. I've got my flask here full of old Ainsford 2F, and so I'm going to go from my flask into my powder measurer, and remember that I do this even though you can measure from the spout on this powder measure, and you could dump it right into the chamber. I don't skip the part of going to my powder measurer rather than going directly to the chamber, because we've shot this several times today, if there is a smoldering ember in there and it decides that it's going to go off when I pour the powder in, I sure don't want to be pouring it out of my flask. Blow yourself to Valhalla if you do something like that. So we're going to take it out of the flask into the powder measure. Then all I've got is 35 grains that would go off if I did indeed find a burning ember down there. So I put in my 35 grains. I have put in the patch, put my round ball on top, and let's put that down. That's bringing her even a little more close to the front of the chamber than I experienced even with without the patch, obviously. So we'll see how that does. Again, 35 grains to the top of my powder measure, and then right into the chamber. I'm going to put my felt wad on top. As I said, try to get that evened up a little bit there. I got her a little cockeyed. There we go. Again, that the experienced Civil War veterans would have they talked about using an old hat. Going to seat that in there. And these wads are lubricated, so I'm not going to put lube over the front. We're just going to see how they go with a lubricated wad. And I'm getting a really good seal with the 457 ball. I'm getting a really good seal all the way around my chamber wall, and so I'm not seeing really any area of my chamber wall that's not peeling off a good chunk of a good ring of lead. I set my ball on top, my felt wad, put it down in there, and we are rolling along. So if we'll get a close-up here of what this looks like with the felt wad, and I'll try to turn the gun where you can see it. So I've got my 35 grains of powder from my little measurer, and I'm going to put that right down inside the chamber. I'm going to set a felt wad on top. Whoops, I'm going to go to a round ball, not a conical. And I'm going to roll my round ball around and I'm going to put that right down inside the chamber. And what just flew out of there, a very nice round ring of lead that tells me that I'm shaving the right amount of lead that is coming off all the way around the ball. So I'll finish up the loading process here. We're going to shoot 6 rounds. I am not putting the lubricant over the top of the ball. I'm going to go ahead and just shoot it exposed like this because the patch is lubricated. So in theory, we should get by. I want to try that out as well. And when I get the aim cam on, you'll notice that I've got a chronograph set up too. So we'll be able to see the difference between 30 grains of old Ainsford powder and a round ball, velocity-wise, and then go back to the Johnston & Dow 217 grain bullet with 30 grains. I can't put 35 in because you really got to push it hard to get 35 in and get that bullet below the front of the chamber. But we'll compare the velocities and see what we get. All right, so there we've got our 35 grains with a felt wad under a 454 ball, and it looks like we stayed in the 800s on velocity. So I'm going to go ahead and load up the Johnston & Dow 217 grain Conical, and let's give this thing another try and see how that one turns out. All right, well, I've backed off the powder charge here to 30 grains because the Conical takes up more space in the chamber, and I've got to have enough room so that this Conical will be compressed down on the powder and give me enough room to be able to still rotate the cylinder without anything popping out the end, without the end of the bullet protruding far enough to impair the rotation of that cylinder. So I've got one to go, and I'll go ahead and dump my powder in. Put on my last Conical, swing that under the rammer, and I think we got it. So there is 6 rounds in here, and again, I'm loading 6 as they would have during the Civil War or Old West period, and Colt instructions actually said load 6 and drop your hammer on the safety pin in between 2 chambers. There's a little notch in the hammer. It goes over that pin. It prevents it from rotating, and you could carry 6. And that 6 shot was going to be extremely more valuable than carrying 5 and then ever trying to reload or even switch cylinders if you carried a second cylinder. So I've got her all set. The only thing I got left to do is we'll put some caps on it and run this thing through the chronograph, see where we're at. All right, got them capped. We got our 217 grain Johnston & Dow bullet in here, over 30 grains of powder. Let's give this thing a try and see what we get for velocity and accuracy. Well, it looks like we dropped our velocity by about 100 feet per second with this 217 grain bullet, and the recoil was considerably more than with the round ball. Accuracy, however, seems to still be looking pretty good. I'm still hitting high and to the right, almost exactly the same place that I was hitting with the round ball. So not a whole lot of difference there. Don't have to make a big adjustment in your point of aim if you went from one projectile to the other. So which is better? I guess depends on what you're doing. Your conical bullet's going to be a deeper penetrator, according to the soldier that talked to Elmer Keith, and which makes perfect sense today, since that's what we use is conical bullets while we hunt, and we know that the penetration is a big thing on wild game. Round ball, if you wanted to cause a shock, according to the Civil War soldiers. So, and both are hitting in the same place. So pretty easy transition once you got this gun kind of sighted in and hitting in the right place where you preferred to have your point of aim. Then you can go from one to the other with a little bit of reduction in powder, so you could clear the end of the cylinder, and you'd have an accurate piece no matter what you did. So other thing I'm impressed with is I don't know if it's the caps or just being a little more careful, but I did change to a Remington number 11 this week. And if you watch the first 1860 Army shooting video, it seemed to have 2 misfires with about every cylinder full. And I just shot 30 shots today. Loaded this thing 5 times, 6 shots per cylinder. Never a single misfire, and I feel like I could continue to shoot this thing all day long. I have almost zero resistance to rotating this chamber or this cylinder at all. It is operating just like when I brought it clean out of the box. That could have a lot to do with not skipping the part of putting the grease on the arbor. I mean, that's the biggest change right there. It's the big difference that I did this time around. And so this is the second video of 2 that we did in the same day. So I'm pretty happy with this thing now. 0 misfires. And no problem cocking and firing this gun as far as fouling goes. Didn't have any problem with the felt wads or putting the lube over the top. So, and shot in the same place with conicals and round ball. So, you know, getting a pretty good group together. A little more happier with this thing than I was 2 weeks ago or a week ago, and feel like we're making some good progress. And we've got a firearm we can have a lot of fun with, maybe compete in cowboy action with, and feel like it's reliable and it's accurate. And work a little bit on the sights, but outside of that, feel like it's a gun worthy of saying that I can hit some things with it. So if you like the video, please hit like, and that helps us apparently as far as YouTube, how that works, and gets us out there a little bit more. And please hit the subscribe button as well, so I can share more frontier Western heritage type firearm information with folks who may not have this background but have an interest. So see you next time. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next time on the Frontier Western Heritage channel. Thanks. So I'm going to pour my 35 grains in. Hey Sam, I need a close-up. I need a close-up. Okay.
When am I zooming in?
When I say I'm pouring in my 35 grains of powder. With this 217 grain bullet, and the recoil was considerably more than with the round ball. Accuracy, however,